Even the nicest people in the world have their limits, and when they hit that breaking point, the results can be explosive. These bonkers stories we've gathered from around the web are about normal people finally snapping under pressure, including one wild tale about a dad who finally had enough of his toxic family, and they might have you cheering for the underdog, or leave your jaw on the floor. I attended the wedding of my cousin, not expecting to see her snap. She had a close friend who was kind of broke. When it comes to the wedding gift, most folks give cash, right? But her friend didn't have the money, so she gifted a pretty cool piece of art instead. It wasn't pricey, of course, but it was definitely heartfelt. The bride loved it, but her new husband was a straight-up snob. He just laughed at the gift and even bad-mouthed the friend to both families, calling her cheap. That's when things went off the rails. The bride had enough. She walked to the front of their packed reception, grabbed the mic, and called it quits on their marriage right then and there. She then stormed off, not forgetting that night anytime soon. A former colleague of mine, a woman, endured constant abuse from an older coworker named Tom. The company did nothing about it. He even followed her home, forcing her to move. But he upped the ante. I couldn't believe it, but he actually bought the house next door to hers. That's when she finally snapped, and it was crazy. She walked into work with a baseball bat, asking reception if Tom was around. When asked why, she simply stated that she was there to kill him. Tom had fled though, as reception had warned him, so she took her frustrations out on his office instead. When the cops arrived, they didn't charge her. It was understood that her threat was a plea for help. Just as well they'd warned Tom if she had found him, she would have made good on her threat. After a mandated break, she came back to work. But the worst part? The company fell so short of their duty of protection that they put her on the same project as Tom, with him as her manager. Can you believe that? My friend is the sweetest person around, who always knows how to help when you're down. She's super chill, never fights, and usually talks things out when she disagrees with someone. One day at school, we had to run a mile for gym class. My friend isn't the sporty type, so she finished the mile in like 11 minutes. Everyone was cool, except this jock who began teasing her. She was having a tough day already, so didn't need this. She confronted him saying, "Don't be a jerk, nobody's perfect at everything." He continued to be mean, even making fun of her accent. Now this wasn't the first time this guy irritated her. She'd always handled previous incidents respectfully, but he didn't get the message. She stood her ground, telling him, "Say one more word and you'll regret it." He didn't believe her and opened his mouth to make another rude remark. Big mistake. He hadn't even finished his first word when she socked him right on the nose, sending him running for the nurse with a bloody nose. The shock on his face when it happened was priceless. She got suspended for a day, but the principal understood why she did what she did because he knew this guy could be an obnoxious pain. She didn't apologize, and now he's genuinely afraid of her. I was in 6th grade when this happened. One of my good friends at the time had it really hard at home, and you could tell by the way that he carried himself. As a result, he seemed to be vulnerable to bullies. But of course, the worst bully of all wasn't one of our classmates. I was headed to the washroom one day when I saw a teacher, Mrs. Brown, reach out and slap my friend. I was so shocked I stopped in my tracks. Then my heart started racing. I knew I couldn't let her get away with it. I decided to intervene and informed her I was taking my friend to the office and she couldn't stop me. Her pale face was a sight to behold. Next, I took my friend to the principal's office, walking right past the startled secretary. The principal was on a call. I pointed to my friend's red face with a clear slap mark on it and told her to end the call. She did. I made it clear she had to call his mom, my mom, and then the cops. Otherwise, I would. The look on her face said it all. The cherry on top was watching Mrs. Brown being escorted away in handcuffs by the police. I didn't feel a bit sorry, although it was terrifying in the moment. Ever since then, I've never been scared to speak up when something's not right. This happened in English class during my senior year. The nicest kid who'd shared my desk space for 3 years was pushed to his limit by this total tool. This guy thought it was funny to joke about hooking up with the nice kid's sister. Well, there was something that he didn't know. She was just a 5-year-old. So the nice kid got the perfect payback without throwing a punch. The next day, He showed a slideshow of his little sis's zoo trip. At the end, he reminded the class of the jerk's comment. Awkward, right? The tool got ticked off and shoved the nice kid. When he walked back to his seat, the nice kid got him back. He shoved him back with a force of strength we didn't even know that he was capable of. The whole class went silent and we looked at the teacher. Her reaction was shocking. She sent the guy to the nurse, but she also made sure he got a week of detention afterward. The nice kid? He got off scot-free. Everyone was on his side. Later, the jerk got expelled. Meanwhile, the nice kid graduated as valedictorian. Talk about karma. During my second high school year, I attended an engineering-focused school and was part of an aerospace class. I absolutely loved the teacher, the best I've ever had. He was cool, funny, and treated us to snacks during tests. Towards the end of the year, we did a project where we created water bottle rockets that we'd pressurize and launch. One day, a student acted dumb and ran on the field to catch a rocket, even after our teacher had repeatedly warned against it. These rockets can shoot hundreds of feet. If one lands on you, it's bad news. The teacher flipped out, chased the student, and genuinely lost it. He even hurled his clipboard after them. We all sat quietly, taken aback, letting the teacher regain his calm. After he did, he sincerely apologized. Honestly, I can't blame the teacher for reacting. The student was completely reckless, ignoring clear warnings. The teacher must have felt extremely frustrated. Thankfully, I never saw him that angry again. Once in high school, we went on a science trip to a nature center. I ended up in a group with the soon-to-be valedictorian. Unfortunately, the weather was awful that day, and our group decided to bail. That just left me and the valedictorian to do the entire project. I came back from collecting some samples to see the valedictorian seething. He ranted about the group, the weather, and pretty much everything else, got tired, and threw his water bottle down a hill. That was the first and only time I heard him curse or get loud. One of the girls in our group, who didn't do anything for the project, confronted him on the bus. I guess another group had overheard him having a meltdown and dropping the names of the lazy kids from our group, and they told her about it. She confronted him about what he'd said about her, particularly what he said about her not being useful. The valedictorian just stared at her with a snarky expression and asked, "Are you going to deny it?" That kept her quiet. My first year of teaching was pretty rocky, and there was this one class that was a real nightmare. The guys in it were just wild. The girls were awesome though, especially this one who joined halfway from South America, a total gem. Then came a day when this boy was being incessantly disruptive. I thought I was about to snap, but I was in for a surprise. The newer girl had it. She spun round, yelled, "You're such an idiot," and really let loose on him about his constant rude behavior. The kid was totally thrown, couldn't get a word in without her shutting him down. Eventually, things settled down, and I picked up the lesson again. At the end, she came up to me, apologizing for the drama. I knew I should discourage it, but I couldn't help being proud. Instead, I winked at her and said, "No reason to apologize. That was amazing. Big thank you for having my back there. I should have dealt with him better, so I'm sorry you had to step in, but seriously, never apologize for helping someone out." This one time in middle school, my super tall and chill buddy, who is seriously the best dude on earth, got mocked about his mom by this short popular kid. Without missing a beat, my pal picked him up by his shirt. He then held him up to a locker, keeping him eye level, and said, "Don't you dare disrespect my mom like that." That moment will always crack me up when I think about him. My dad was a total sweetheart towards his family, but sadly, they tended to take him for granted. Still, he held his cool until his sister dragged him to court, accusing him of elder abuse of their mom. Now, I've been known to use rude language when talking about my aunt, but Dad always kept his cool. I'm not sure I'd ever heard him utter a swear word until that day. That's when I knew he'd finally hit his limit. Luckily, the judge agreed with him, even if she chastised him for his language. One of my friends really went out on a limb for her longtime best friend. She devoted her whole life to helping her friend stay on the straight and narrow, but that friend was grumpy and whined non-stop about her tough situation, to a degree where she became self-absorbed. She was stuck in a loop complaining about how unfair everything was and how much self-doubt she had. Even worse, one day, this grumpy friend decided to ditch everyone for the cool kids who We're honestly just a group of weird loner type dudes. She thought she was fitting in because she prided herself on being different from other girls. My friend, as sweet and quiet as she is, finally hit her limit. When her ex-best friend predictably came begging to return, her reaction was brutal. She gave her the cold shoulder and then had a good laugh about the whole thing to me. It was the first time I'd seen her truly riled up and displaying anything other than her usual cool. My mom's an absolute angel, patient and caring. Unless you're my sibling or dad, you'd never see her lose her cool. My 16-year-old niece, not a familiar face in our family, was kicked out of her mom's house in Vermont. So, my mom brought her in, saving her from foster care, and got nothing but a spoiled attitude in return. One night, as we piled into the car, she started swearing at my mom. Mom told her to step out, but she wouldn't. Big mistake. Mom lost it. She climbed into the car, yanked my niece out by her hair, and told her to take the bus home before getting back in the car and driving away. Her reaction was totally justified, if you ask me. Watching my soft-hearted mom put this terrible brat in her place was the greatest thing ever. Back when I was younger, I had a gig at Goodwill. Part of my job was mentoring adults with high-functioning autism. One day, our regional manager popped in for some tweaks. One adult I was helping had trichophagia, or a hair-eating disorder. This left her with a bald spot, which she hid with a pink hair extension. The manager insisted she go home to dye her hair a natural color, saying she was breaking dress code. She got upset, so I told her to hang on. I'd deal with this. I tried explaining her situation to the boss, but he was having none of it. Thankfully, my store manager stepped up. She really let him have it. She held up our mission of giving job opportunities to people with special needs. She then pointed out the many bad habits he had and mistakes he made at work. She finished with a dig at his name, Jarrett, saying it wasn't even real. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. After all that, we let our girl off early, but made sure she was paid for a full day. A kid I've known since grade 1 was a pretty cool guy. We weren't super close, but hanging out was never a hassle. One day during lunch, there were some girls at the table next to ours. This unsuspecting dude was minding his business. He was just chowing down on a sandwich from his lunchbox. He had his back to them. These girls thought it'd be fun to snatch his lunchbox while he tossed his trash. Not sure why it happened, but I guess there was a deep connection between this guy and his lunchbox. When he realized it was gone, man, he blew a fuse. He started shrieking and throwing everything he could get his hands on at these girls. It scared the heck out of everyone then, but wow, was it ever a hilarious sight to witness when I look back on it. My ex-boyfriend was a chill dude. We'd recently split up during our junior year of high school and still had feelings for each other. I was new to the school and he was the only one I knew. He was super nice, always lending a hand even when no one asked. Everyone loved him and trusted him with pretty much anything. He was so knowledgeable he could have taught some of our classes. So there I was in math, next to this cocky football star who just wouldn't stop bothering me. He constantly touched me and made me feel uncomfortable. One day, he crossed a line when he started making inappropriate comments about me. Suddenly, my ex sprang up. It was dead silent as he stared down the football star and declared, "Don't talk about her like that." It may not seem like a big deal, but you could see the anger in his gaze. If the football star had kept it up, I'm sure my ex would have leveled him. People couldn't stop chatting about how my ex looked like he was about to explode. There was this weird energy in the room. The room was so silent you could hear a pin drop. I've never seen my ex show any signs of aggression, but I'm pretty confident he would have done whatever it took. The school let me switch seats to be next to my ex, and I never had to deal with that harassment again. I had this friend in middle school. Let's call him Bob. He was a lot shorter than everyone else, standing maybe half a foot less than the average 5 feet. Despite his small build, Bob was awesome. He loved learning and video games, plus he was a fun hang-around. Just a really cool guy. But here's the twist. Now our gym teacher was a total pain. He had a habit of assigning ridiculous nicknames and basically talking down to us all the time, instead of boosting our morale. One horrible day, this jerk made a comment about Bob's mom. Now it's important to know that she had fibromyalgia and other health problems, clearly struggling, but definitely not by choice. Something just switched on in Bob that day. Despite his size, he stood up to our 6-foot-tall gym teacher, and boy, that guy didn't stand a chance against furious Bob. Luckily, they were separated before things escalated badly. In the aftermath, the nasty gym teacher got what he deserved. He was fired for his terrible behavior. At my big brother's wedding, things got wild. He's a great dude, sometimes too great. His ex was awful. He loved her despite her telling him he was worthless. She demanded an expensive ring and a wedding, so that happened. I didn't know how bad the relationship was until that day. The whole thing was high stress, and she was behaving even worse than usual. She claimed the biggest piece of wedding cake, leaving none for him, and had the guts to tell him to diet, even though he was on the skinny side. That was it. He lost it. He took a handful of cake and pressed it right into the lace of her fancy dress, then he dropped the divorce bomb. He let loose about how she pushed him into depression. He's much happier now though. They cut ties and live continents apart. My friend Daryl is this big, quiet guy who doesn't really cause any issues. He's a giant, he's 6'5" tall and weighs 250 pounds. Daryl is loved by everyone at school since he plays football. Anyway, this one day in Spanish class, our class clown was at his usual stuff. He was talking too loud and insulting people. He singled out a girl, Nellie. He insulted her pretty badly, making a nasty comment about a birthmark on her neck. Everyone was pretty upset and ready to give him a piece of their minds. But then Daryl got up. He strolled over to the dude and, believe it or not, lifted him up by his hair. He said plain and clear, "If you don't zip it now, I'm going to slam you into that wall." He then pointed at the closest wall. He let the clown down and went back to his own business. The clown, however, didn't let it rest. Huge mistake. He tried to attack Daryl, but he reacted fast. He swung his elbow and sent him flying. Then he raced over, lifted him by the shoulder, and punched a hole in the drywall near the pest's head. Of course, this attracted the attention of the security, and both Daryl and the clown ended up getting arrested. Thankfully, they only got minor fines for the damages. I'm still impressed by the patched up hole in the wall. It's a stark reminder of that eventful day. I worked tech support at a call center, dealing with some tough problems. There was this quiet, kind guy from my training class who only spoke if spoken to. Real chill. Just as we finished training, the bosses changed loads of things in our work. They put a ton of pressure on us to finish paperwork faster, do quicker research, and meet more metrics. What really sucked was that the bosses' favorites could take breaks whenever they wanted, but we'd pay the price to keep our average stats okay. This nice guy tried to do everything right. Talked to his boss, their boss, HR, but it only got worse and they made him work overtime. One day, the nice guy was stuck in a long, difficult call. The customer was being super mean and his bosses wouldn't let him end the call. They were basically shouting at him to fix the problem and move on to the next. But we couldn't hang up, only the customer could. Out of nowhere, nice guy just stood up and climbed onto his desk. He threw down his headset and yelled, "Screw this!" He looked around at everyone, especially those who took long breaks and the bosses. Then he just left and no one ever saw him again. We all sat there in silence, too scared to even move. Still, gotta admit, it was a pretty epic exit. My friend's mom tragically died months before our sophomore year. Somehow, he managed to pull it together for school, despite being an only child with no dad. His mom meant the world to him. One kid, who thought he was cool but just annoyed everyone, made a heartless joke about his mom's death. I'm not sure exactly what he said. I just remember that my friend lost it. He ended up breaking the kid's nose and fracturing his left eye socket. Despite the rude kid's comment, my friend had to face some pretty brutal consequences. He ended up getting expelled from school. We were glad he set the rude kid straight, but it was a steep price to pay. So there was this lady I worked with, Mary. Always happy, always greeting everybody in the cafeteria, and just generally liked. She'd been doing finance stuff for special jobs for 15 years and wanted to retire soon. Our boss started trying to get her to finish our yearly budget report more quickly, but that thing was massive. It was a huge undertaking. Mary said she'd have it done in a couple of weeks, which was the normal timeline for it, but the boss had another idea. He insisted it was needed within a week for upper management. Mary said it was impossible. That's when the boss made a huge mistake. He sent an email to Mary, along with others in our team and some assistant managers. In it, he basically called Mary out for being lazy and making us look bad. Mary didn't stand for it, saying it was impossible to do the job any faster, and she didn't like being made a scapegoat. But what she did next was the best part of all. She decided to retire right then and there, leaving the boss with no one to do the report. She was the only one who could handle the budget report, so her department was in deep trouble. I wasn't mad though. I could only admire her for standing up for herself. My dad put up with so much from his siblings. They mooched, they stole, and they got into debt and expected him to pay it off. He took it until the day one of them insulted my mom. That's when he snapped and finally got brutal revenge for everything they'd done over the years. He tore up all the checks he'd written for them the day before, repossessed the cars he'd gifted, and barred them from any family property. He even publicly disowned them in the local paper. Suddenly, they had no one left to enable their terrible behavior. Within a few weeks, they and their families tucked tail and disappeared from town while still owing plenty of people money. In the end, they all went overseas. Last I heard, the sisters are somewhere in Canada and the brothers driving taxis in Australia. That is going to bring us to the end of the video on when nice people finally snap. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like rating, subscribe for more, comment below, and we'll be back with a brand new video very soon.